powered planes, possibly on the drawing board, but realistically within our lifetimes, what we're much more likely to see is a slow contraction of the airline industry around core customers who can afford to pay a lot to get from place to place. Meanwhile, necessary transportation, ground transportation, has to be minimized by redesigning our cities so that people don't have to get into motorized transport in order to get to where they work or shop. And then providing what motorized transport we need through the most efficient sources, which tend to be public transportation of various kinds, and then encouraging bicycling and walking wherever possible, making it safe and enjoyable for people to walk and bicycle. Also with our buildings, there were some very good presentations and comments this morning about building efficiency, energy efficiency, and how drastically that could be improved. I'm sure many of you are well aware of the Passive House movement in Germany, over 20,000 structures already built with virtually zero energy inputs, even in a cold climate. In the US, I believe it's only a few dozen of these structures have been built, as opposed to 20,000 in Germany. I'm not sure of the number in Canada. But clearly, retrofitting existing buildings and changing building standards for future construction is an extremely important part of this whole transitional period. And then the food system. Some of our most crucial uses of energy are in our food system, growing food and transporting food. But we have created a food system that is overwhelmingly dependent, again, on fossil fuels, primarily oil and natural gas. Natural gas for fertilizer, oil for transportation, other chemicals, and for fueling farm equipment. So taking oil out of the food system is extremely important. Localizing food systems, experimentation with organic agriculture has been going on for decades now, and there are excellent trials and systems and examples all around the world showing that food can be grown as intensively using ecological methods as using chemical-dependent methods. But some of these things actually add up to a plus if we start to think differently. If our assumption is that the future looks like the 1960s and the Jetsons, only more so, then I think we're going to be very disappointed. But does that way of life actually make us that much happier? There is a whole field now of happiness studies in psychology looking at self-reported levels of satisfaction with life, and it turns out that sitting in traffic jams does not make us happy. And in fact, it turns out that higher levels of consumption don't necessarily make us happy. Certainly, if people don't have enough energy to stay warm at night, if they don't have enough food to eat, then they're not going to be particularly happy. But once basic needs are met, there's a pretty shaky correlation between levels of satisfaction and rates of consumption. It turns out that we built this consumer society over the course of an anomalous period of time, mostly the 20th century, when we saw that it was possible to grow the economy, and there was a lot of money to be made doing so. And so we built institutions that depend upon constant economic growth, governmental institutions that require constantly increasing tax revenues in order to fund government services to the population, just one example. But an ever-increasing economy simply may not be in the cards for us if, in fact, those limits to growth scenario studies from the 1970s were correct, we may be looking at a century of economic contraction. That could be very bad news, or it could be mildly bad and partially positive news, depending on how we handle it, whether we plan for it or simply let ourselves hit the wall. Certainly we speak often of things like peak oil or peak phosphorus depleting non-renewable resources, but there are plenty of things that are renewable and that aren't at peak. And if we concentrate more on those, less on GDP and more on quality of life, there's every reason to think that we could make this transition during the course of the 20th century in a peaceful and healthful and satisfactory way. I don't think that's at all a given. Quite frankly, I think the way we're going right now is leading us toward conflict over depleting resources, and it's leading us toward economies that will go through boom and bust cycles in which each boom is smaller and each bust is deeper. Hopefully, it won't take us too long to recognize that pattern, but it's already very late in the day, both from the standpoint of the climate and from the standpoint of fossil fuel resource quality, especially when it comes to oil and natural gas. So I hope I haven't depressed you too much, but this is the world the way I see it and my organization sees it, and we do try to provide on our website, resilience.org, we try to provide daily updated information to help individuals and households and communities find ways to adapt to this new economic reality in ways that are not only sensible and economic, but also enjoyable and fun and artistic. So I hope the same to you. Thank you.